Welcome back to the Christianity and Business Podcast, an initiative of the Archie W. Dunham College of Business at Houston Christian University. I'm your host, Darren Shear, and this is the show that helps Christian business leaders to integrate biblical values into business. On today's episode, we're joined by Beiler. Auntie Beiler is known as the founder of Auntie Anne's, the world's largest pretzel franchise, which I know everyone has already heard of. It's in how many countries now, Anne?
Probably around 25. I don't know the exact number, but we have sold the company, so I think it's right around 25.
And today she's a speaker, author, and leader. Her entrepreneurial insights and personal story have been featured on many television shows, including Secret Millionaire, The Oprah Winfrey Show, and Good Morning America, and has also been highlighted in numerous publications such as Fortune Inc., Guidepost, and Entrepreneur magazines. And she's the author of The Secret Lies Within, Overcome and Lead, and her newest, a cookbook, which you're all going to want to get, which is called Come to the Table. And she regularly speaks at conferences around the U.S. And I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for joining us on the Christianity and Business Podcast today.
Well, thank you, Darren, for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of your show.
I'm so curious, being Auntie Anne, what is your favorite go-to snack at Auntie Anne's?
Oh, at Auntie Anne's, I'm glad you said that because I was like, going to tell you, Auntie Anne's is my favorite snack. It just depends on what I'm really jonesing for. You know what I mean? Is it a salted pretzel or is it a sweet one? So I enjoy the salted pretzel with a honey mustard, or my sweet pretzel is the almond with the caramel dip. So there you go.
Oh, delicious. And I have to say, growing up in the 90s, I remember one of my favorite memories with my mom is she would take us back to school shopping at the mall. And I didn't care much about the clothes, but I knew that I was going to get a Auntie Anne's cinnamon sugar pretzel. And I just looked forward to that every year. Of course, I got to have them anytime we'd go to the mall too. But for some reason, back to school shopping has always been associated in my mind with a cinnamon sugar Auntie Anne's pretzel.
I love those stories. Yeah. Back in the early 90s, that's when we were getting started. 88 is when we started the company. And so our very first mall location was in actually the end of 1989, December of 89, but we really launched out into the mall world in the 90s, early 90s, 91, 92, 93. So you must have been just a little kid at that point. It's hard for me to imagine that we.
Yeah, it's kind of the late 90s. Okay. Actually, I worked at the Great American Cookie Company right across the way. Yeah. I should have gone to work for y'all.
Yes. Yes, you should have.
I've got some stories from that experience, but
hindsight is always 20/20. So yes, that's all right.
Indeed. One of the things I've been really fascinated with about you is that you grew up Amish Mennonite. How did that impact the way you approach business?
Well, our growing up, our parents are truly our role models, and they're the ones that teach us. It's not so much what they say, but it's what they do, right? And so no matter what culture you come from, you're very impacted by that culture, your family of origin. And so the Amish culture is a very strong culture. And I'm grateful today that I'm no longer, some people ask me if I'm still Amish, and I have to ask them, do I look Amish? And they always look at me kind of puzzled, like, no. And I'm like, well, there's your answer. I am not Amish. But culturally, I'm grateful for the upbringing, because I feel like it gave me a very strong, it gave me a strong sense of God, of family, faith. And I truly believe that my parents gave me everything I needed. I feel the emotion of that right now. They gave me everything I needed to weather the storms of life and to get through life successfully. We had dinner, sat around the table 3 times a day, every single day. Winter, summer, spring, fall, it didn't matter. Family does that. That's what we did. And so it's around the table is one of the reasons why I did the cookbook, is because that's really where I got to know my family. Around the table 3 times a day without fail. There were no excuses. Like, we didn't start eating until all 10 of us sat at the table. There were 8 of us kids. And so I feel like that foundation, Darren, even though we never talked about the word, we never talked about career around the table. In the Amish culture, you go through 8th grade, and then you quit school. I'm not a high school dropout, but it's part of the culture. And even today, the Amish people still go through 8th grade or until you turn 14. And then you go to work on the farm or find a job to help the family. And that's what I did. I have no regrets. I couldn't wait to help my mom and dad. I loved my parents. There was 3 things that I just was confident of as a kid. I love God. I love my parents, and I wanted to please God and my parents. And so when I was able to, work on the farm or get an outside job and give mom and dad my paycheck, well, that gave me great joy. I know it sounds almost, I'm not sure what that sounds like to the listeners, but it really gave me a really strong sense of family, and that we're here to help each other be family and to help in time of need. And let me tell you, when there was 8 kids in the family, there was always a time of need. So my parents, I feel like, gave me everything I needed to get through life. I'm here today, and I've experienced more life than I ever imagined.
And they would give you a list every Thursday, was it?
That's correct. You read my book.
Okay, what was on that list?
Well, mom and dad were always on the farm somewhere. My dad was either, in the field, out in the barn, or my mom was always in the house or out in the garden, or, it was a very traditional family life that we experienced back then. And it wasn't just the Amish life. It was kind of a culture, the farming culture. It's what you do when you're on the farm, whether it's Amish or non-Amish, it didn't matter. But the farm life was very, I want to say, hardworking people come from farms. And so mom was always around, but for about 2 years, my dad needed to make some extra money. So they went to a farmer's market in Philadelphia, which was a 2-hour drive from our home. And it was that one Thursday night for about 2 years that my mom would go with my dad to the farmer's market. And when I got home from school, I would have been probably about 12, maybe 11, 12 years old. My mom would have a list of things for me to bake for my dad to take to the farmer's market on Friday morning and Saturday. So I would come home, and I knew mom wasn't going to be there. And I could still feel that. Even right now, I can still feel the almost abandonment. It's what I almost felt like, even though there was all these kids around. But it was my job, mine alone, to go into the basement and bake 60, 70, 80 pies and cakes by myself from scratch. And what saved me, and what was the reason I was able to do that was because I had learned how to bake as a little girl. I mean, I was still a little girl then, but by that time, by the age of 12, I knew enough about baking. And my dad bought a great big, huge old pizza oven, gas pizza oven, put it in our basement in the farmhouse. And so I was able to bake about 50 or 60 pies almost at once. So it was a matter of, getting them all together and putting them in the oven. And so on a school night, that's what I did, and went to school the next morning.
So you really learned how to do hard things.
I sure did.
As I've studied the faith and work movement, it seems like a lot of the Christian denominations are sort of just now waking up to this faith and work integration mandate from the Lord.
Yes.
But the Mennonites, I have such tremendous respect for the Mennonite and Amish tradition. This has always been part of the culture, faith and work. They just go together, right?
Absolutely. And it's called, what I experienced as a kid was perseverance. Some people may call it child abuse. I don't know, but it was nothing. It was what everybody did. And mom and dad would teach us how to do things without really saying a whole lot, but they did teach us that that work is fun. It's pleasurable. Like it's fun to have to get out there and work and to enjoy the fruit of your hard labor. And hard labor for us was working the garden. My mom had probably I don't know, 2-acre garden. And then we would have acres and acres of a cash crop like tomatoes and watermelon or pumpkin or whatever. And so working in the field is hard work out in the heat of the day. And you come home but you feel this satisfaction. And my mom always said, do it with will, do it with might. Things done by half are never done right. So they taught us how to give it all you got and give it your very best. And I think that's a model that we could actually adopt and bring back if it's possible.
Yes, yes, and it's rooted in the Christian faith.
Absolutely.
And you've been through some really just unthinkable tragedies. How have your personal tragedies impacted your approach to life and business?
Well, I grew up believing and thinking, nobody really said this to me, but the message was, life is good. God is harsh. Meaning, a family of 10 of us, we never really experienced any death. We had a few little minor accidents on the farm. When I was 18 years old, my boyfriend at that time, my husband now, his brother was killed. Tragically was hit by a stone truck while he was driving his motorcycle. Was killed, and that was the extent of hardships or struggles in my life. And all of it impacted me, but it wasn't life changing for me. But believing that life is good is because life was very good for us on the farm, and God is harsh meant that if I keep all of the 10 commandments, life is good as long as I keep all the 10 commandments and I do everything just right. Please, mom and dad, please, God. But if I break the 10 commandments, or if I'm unkind, or if I'm angry, if I'm mad, or if I'm bad, then God may be displeased with me. So life is good, God is harsh. What I know today is that after over 7 decades of real life's experiences, is the truth that life is hard, God is good, and I'm not confused about that anymore. So as Jonas and I went into our marriage, we were both young. I was 19, he was 21. And it's a very typical, even to this day, many Amish people get married very young, but we're taught, role modeled how to be families. So it's what we did. We were in love, and we loved each other, loved God. We wanted to have our own family. And within a couple of years, we had our first daughter. And so we were married about 7 years. We had 2 girls, and life was good. We were in a vibrant church at that time. We were youth pastors, and life was as good as I thought it was ever going to be. And so we were really not prepared for tragedy or trauma of any kind. And our daughter, our 19-month-old daughter, again, we're just loving our family life, and Jonas and I just very connected in every way, spiritually, physically. It was a great time for us, very happy marriage. And but on a Monday morning, our 19-month-old daughter was walking to my mom's house, which we both lived on a very small farm and lived very close to each other. And my sister worked for my father, and she was loading and unloading sand with a front end loader. And she always looked for Angie, was our daughter, and would look for her, make sure she was safe there. And very often she would get off of the tractor and pull Angie up, and they would go for a ride together. And that particular morning, she did not see Angie as she looked to see where she was. But when she went to pull the tractor front, she saw Angie's body in front of the tractor, and she had accidentally drove over her, and she was killed instantly. Life is good, God is harsh. I was a good girl. I went into spiritual confusion and emotional pain that I had no way of knowing what to do with it except to pretend that I'm okay. And over time, that really got me in big trouble.
Mm. So where did you turn in the midst of that tragedy?
Jonas and I really, as close as we were, we became very disconnected because we didn't know what to say. How do you talk about grief? How do you put words to your feelings? Like the vocabulary for we didn't know, so we went into a very silent mode, and we began to live a just existing in our marriage. I loved him, and he loved me, and the loss and the grief of Angela, our youngest baby, our 4-year-old daughter at that time, who missed her baby sister, and my sister, who was driving the tractor. There was just so much in that one moment that happened that it was really hard to know what to say or how to talk about it or how to live life. And so what I knew to do was you just persevere, like I always did, and you just push your way through it. And after about 2 or 3 months of that, Jonas and I obviously could not talk about how we felt. And I went to my pastor by an invitation from him to come and see him at his office. And when I did, I was able to truly unload. I realized, oh, I can talk about this. And it was a great release and a relief for me to know that I can talk about it as long as someone would listen to me. And before I left his office, he took advantage of me physically. And at that time, it sounds weird to me now, even as I say this, but I didn't understand abuse of spiritual power. I didn't know anything about sexual abuse. I didn't even, back in the day, I didn't even know of anyone who had committed adultery in my neighborhood. I don't know. I was very naive. But again, it was a very different world than what it is today. Today, you can research anything, and I think most everybody knows now about, abuse. There are many kinds of abuse, but the sexual abuse by a spiritual leader, by a pastor or your father, are the greatest betrayals that anyone can experience. And well, that just took me into a much deeper. Angie's death took me into deep grief, but then the abuse that took me into great despair, guilt, shame. I made a choice. It was not my fault that Angie was killed. It was not my fault that I was abused. I didn't do anything to deserve that. But as I walked out of the office that day, feeling completely, broken isn't even the right word, just lost, because this was a man that we had loved and trusted and believed in, and everybody loved him. But as I left the office that day, I made a choice. This was my choice, that I would keep this a secret and I would never tell anyone. That's why I can tell it to you today, because I learned, it took me a long time. That one secret kept me in 7 years of sexual abuse with my pastor. I continued going to church, continued to live a life that I pretended no one knew. I would never tell. And it took me to skin and bones with a heart that raced constantly, a stomach that was in knots for years. I thought that's just the way life is. And I made my bed, so I'm going to have to lay in it. I began to feel so guilty and so ashamed that at the age of 36, I truly thought life was over for me. And that was all before Auntie Anne's, of course.
Yeah, but only about 4 years before, right?
Oh, yes, correct. That's right.
Yeah, and so kind of bring us up to speed there to 1987, and what kind of led to you starting the pretzel store?
Well, so 1982, I made a confession. Finally, that's a whole story. It's in my book. I made a confession to Jonas because God just totally compelled me to go tell Jonas what was going on in my life. Excuse me. And so as I did, something began to happen. It's found in James 5:16. It's a very short verse, but powerful verse. And it talks about being transparent and open. It says, confess your faults, your sin, your troubles, your struggles, You're just whatever it is that bothers you, confess your sins one to another, to each other, and pray for one another, and then you'll be healed. And when I made that confession to Jonas, which was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my entire life, that was the beginning of a very, very, just a crack in my wall. I'd been in the dark world for 7 years. I knew how to get around in the dark world. Satan gave me all the tools I needed. But to bring my deeds out into the light was very scary for me. And but as I did that, I began to feel the shackles fall off of me, and the chains began to break. But let me tell you, there was years of work that we put into counseling and really trying to make our marriage work. But that was the beginning, 1982. Almost 5 years later, actually 5 years later, almost exactly 5 years later, we found ourselves making soft pretzels. But during those 5 years, Jonas and I we began to reconnect, and Jonas began to study psychology because he was a little Amish guy that him and his dad could fix anything. He could make anything. He could do anything. He had that kind of a brain. And when this happened to us, he would say, and Jonas never blamed me. He somehow instinctively, he sort of knew that this was not my fault and never blamed me, not once. But he was inquisitive, and he kept saying to me, how, and myself as well, like we kept saying, how could this happen to us? Like we grew up in both of us in strong Christian families, active in our churches, loved God, served him. How could this happen to us? How did we get here? And so Jonas then began to study psychology out of Emerge Ministries. They live in the organization to this day in Akron, Ohio. And he studied psychology and became a layman's counselor. And that really was the key to us then beginning to understand what happened to us and the impact of abuse and the long-term effect that it has on you and the dysfunction that brings into your family. It was just unbelievable. We knew nothing about this, but found ourselves in this crazy, confusing, spiritual kind of like, wow, what happened? And so anyway, we got answers through psychology, through the Word of God, of course, but understanding human behavior. Over time, it released us and made us feel like, wow, God is the healer. He really is. He's my redeemer. He really is. No kidding. He knows how to redeem us from those crazy places of pain and anguish and shame and guilt that we find ourselves in. And I would venture to say that most of us don't plan to go there. Certainly I didn't plan to go into that world, but I found myself there. So I believe that out of our pain, our purpose was born. And as we began to find our way back to each other and back to the Lord, I never left God. I know he never left me either. But wow, I didn't like me. I was unlovable. I was unforgivable. I was unchangeable. I believe that with all my heart. But I still kind of believe that God, I sort of believe that God kind of loved me. I think he still loves me. But in those 5 years is where we kind of got our lives back on track. And because Jonas wanted to do marriage counseling, he became a layman's counselor. He was doing it as a free service to anyone that would come to him. And he found himself being so busy from morning to night for almost 5 days a week. And so I said to him one day, well, I think I'll just go to work and I'll find a job. And he's my hero. Even to this day, he's still my hero. I just say, like, Jesus and Jonas are my two best buds. They helped me. They saved me. Jesus spiritually saved me, and Jonas saved me relationally. He saved our relationship in our marriage. And I was so humbled that we could actually still be married and enjoy life together after all of that. And so I wanted to honor him. And I said, I'll just go to work and you can keep doing what you're doing. And I'll go to work and make the dough. How's that? And God took us to a little farmer's market that was selling soft pretzels. And that's where I learned at the age of 40 how to make pretzels. And then not much later, that then took me into the business world of franchising, of all things. I had an 8th grade education, which I mentioned earlier. Jonas, the same. We both grew up in that same culture. There were 3 things we did not have when we started Auntie. And that was, we did not have formal education. We had no capital. When I say we had no capital, we had no money in the bank, and we had no business plan. So that sounds like a disaster. But I love the fact that God can take us. I mean, you read stories in the Bible about people, God chose and picked them up out of wherever they were from, and he called them and he chose them, and he gave them something to do, something of value for the kingdom of God. And that's what he did for us. It didn't matter to him, where we came from. Mm. He just had a task for us to do. And we soon figured out that God had a plan, and the plan was for us to have this company. We needed for it to be profitable so that we could be charitable. So we knew early on, almost from day one, that God created Auntie Anne's to give. And number two, he created Auntie Anne's to be light in the world of business. And before long, with the first year, we did 2 stores at a farmer's market. The next year, we did about 10 in farmers markets, except at the very end, we did a mall, which was like, we thought we had arrived, the blue neon sign. It was amazing. Like, we have arrived. Even then, we had no idea that God was going to take a simple pretzel through the model of franchising around the world. Mm. How can that happen? Only God. Great team. We had great employees as time went on, great employees and experts in the field of franchising. A couple of guys that came in. My youngest brother came in. He was amazing. So people that knew more than I did. I was not intimidated by them, and I wanted to know how to do this. And I loved business. I loved the challenge of it. But the greatest part of Auntie Anne's is the fact that we gave opportunity for many people to have a great job and go around with a product that gave people a better quality of life in Indonesia, and the Philippines, and Malaysia, and in Thailand, and South Korea, and all over the world. That gives me greater joy than any amount of money that I could have put in the bank. Mm.
So in the operating of the company and cultivating the culture of the company, back in the 80s, there weren't nearly as many templates and books and right. Conferences about integrating your faith into your work. Well, how did you what did you look to as inspiration and guidance for cultivating a company that with a Christ-centered culture?
Well, I guess as I actually began to experience corporate America, I began to see what I don't want. And there are great companies out there, like you said, where today there's a lot more information out there about, the faith in the marketplace, right? But back in the day, I remember the conversations and the challenges of faith in the marketplace. It was a big subject, like, how do you do this? Mm. And almost every interview that we did was people would ask me that question: how can you integrate faith in the workplace? Because it was an automatic for me. I didn't think about how to do that. And my response to that was always, how can you separate God from your work? I don't know how to do that, so I can't answer that question. I can only say that we were created to carry God's presence in our bodies, all of us as believers. And that means then, so we carry his presence wherever we go, like into the marketplace, or whether you're a stay-at-home mom, or whether you're a school teacher, or whether you're, whatever God's called you to do, you take his presence with you. And I never figured out how you can separate, like, do I leave God at home and then pick up back in the day, we carried up we picked up our briefcases, not so much our computers, Sure. But it's like, I couldn't envision, like, leaving God at home and then going to work with just my briefcase. And as a Christian in the workplace. So I just feel like even today, Darren, it's almost that. I don't like to use the word simple, but it's not that difficult. Mm. If you love Jesus, and you want to serve him, it's not that difficult. In fact, it's very easy. But I can tell you that, I love the verse where it says, be harmless, be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. And one thing that totally influenced me early on, probably I would say 93, maybe 3 or 4 years after the company started, I found myself feeling, I'm still very involved in the church, traveling around the country, we didn't go overseas until 1994. We went to Indonesia. That was our very first international location, halfway around the world. I'm not sure why we went there, but we did. But it was early on that I'm feeling the call. I mean, we always, Jonas and I both felt very called. This was what God called us to do. And again, it was to give and be a light in the world of business. And but it got even more real to me as we hired people when they came into our home office, and from all over the country, people would want to work at Auntie. And I made it a point to connect with our employees by going to talk every Monday morning. I made my rounds, and we got to about 150 employees in the corporate office. It got very difficult for me to do it in a Monday morning. So I found myself just making my rounds with the employees, and I got to know them. And they knew my story. At some point, I was able to be open, honest, and vulnerable and transparent with my life. So they knew my story, and they began to open up to me. And I was like blown away by the stories that they would tell me. And I was going back to my office one day, and I just said to the Lord, do you want me to be an evangelist? I mean, I don't know. And he just said, I want you to be salt and light. And let me tell you, Darren, that was a moment for me, because I always heard about being a light. We sing this song, it's a light of mine. Don't put your light under a bushel. But what does it mean? And I remember saying to the Lord, it stopped me right in my tracks, and said, Lord, how do I do that? How do I be light? And he said, I'll show you. And, he did. He showed me what that meant. What it meant to me was light doesn't say a word. It simply shines, makes things visible. And salt doesn't say anything, but it makes things tasty. So as time went on, I realized that salt and light is being. And the being part is the internal life. It's my heart, it's my thoughts, it's my mind. This is where I needed to grow. This is what I needed to develop. And I did that through reading business books. And one of my favorite writers back in the day was John Maxwell. I mean, he's still out there, right? Sure. And there was a number of books I read. I was reading books on leadership, because I discovered I'm not a manager. I'm a leader, which shocked me. I had no idea that's what God called me to be. But when I realized he called me to be a leader is someone who influences. And I believe that you influence by the life that you live. And that's where your light, that's what your innermost being, your internal life is what comes out, whether it's good or bad. The pressures of life, the pressures of your business will bring that to light, whatever is inside of you. So I really felt at that point, the Holy Spirit was just telling me to develop the internal part of who I was, and to be an example as a leader in the world of business. Again, reading books and watching other people do business. And I asked lots of questions. And over time, after a couple of years, I would say probably by year 7, I felt like, wow, I'm a businesswoman, and I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
It was an amazing journey.
That's such a great example that you gave about the way that you would walk around the company and really get to know everybody's story and to share your story with them. Could you share another example of a Christ-centered habit that you really tried to instill in the culture, not only in your personal walk with God, but in the culture of the company?
Well, again, I think that so Christ-centered habits, yeah. Um, it goes back to my upbringing. We always prayed before every meal at home in the house, and I didn't realize that people didn't do that, right? And so in the business, at every meeting, whether it was a management team meeting or whether it was a all employee meeting or whether it was a Auntie convention, we always prayed before our meals. I would always talk about. I was not a preacher. I knew God was very clear with me. I want you to be light. Share your life, your story, live your life in front of people. But I would always talk to all employees about the power of light. And this was part of that became our purpose, actually, a statement of purpose. Our management team took that on, and they at one of our meetings, they said, why don't we take the word light and do the acronym, since you feel strongly like God has created Auntie to be light. And so they did the acronym, which is L, lead by example. I, invest in employees. G, give freely. H, honor God. And T, treat all business contacts with respect. And as we did that, we labored over that for a number of meetings till we finally got to the end of that and realized, wow, this is doable. It's strong. It sets the bar pretty high. And for people in the organization who may not have been followers of Christ, I remember one time someone said that's almost impossible to do. Why do we set the standard so high? I said, because we're going to fail. Not all of us will always be able to keep that standard, but it's something that we can keep looking to and keep striving toward. And so we took the word light, and through that grid, all of our decisions at Auntie Anne's were made through the lens of light. Does this, what we're deciding to do, does it line up with light? Are we being light with that decision that we're making? So teaching our people the importance of light, being an example, and being people being transparent, and then the giving aspect of Auntie Anne's, as far as the principle of giving. It was so exciting because we would, from day one at our farmers market, we gave 1/10 of our total income, not the profit, because we had no idea what our profit was the first, I don't know, but we always gave 10% of the gross income. And I don't say that like, that's a simple principle that God talks about. And it's easy to do after you practice it for a while, right?
The gross.
And the gross, yes,
not
exactly.
The net.
And no.
Wow.
Again, people say, what should I do? You know what? This is the way we believed. And you know what? We never one time had a bill that was not paid within 10 days. We never once didn't have the money to pay our employees. It was never about, for me, it was never about a big bank account, but it was about paying our employees well, giving perks to the employees, just doing all kinds of things for the employees, giving to missions. Giving was my passion. And so as time went on, it became a challenge because some of the employees, some of the team leaders, like we should do this or that. So I said, well, listen, as long as we can pay our employees well and we have money left in the bank, that's really all that matters. I'm not about building a huge company with a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And that's okay. God blessed us. But the giving part became, I was passionate about it and still am to this day. But the employees then we would tell those stories about giving. I mean, there's so many stories about giving, and we would always talk about that at our monthly all employee meetings. And this began to, just like the employees began to see the excitement and the value and the passion of it. And they themselves then created a fund, which was theirs, completely their idea, to be able to build a fund. It was called the CARES Committee. And we put money in there, and then they could decide what to do with that money. As far as it was always a community thing. We would give, it would accumulate during the year. And at the end of the year, then they would decide what to do with that money. The CARES Committee was able to create millions of dollars because of the biblical principle of give and it shall be given to you. That's just a couple of things that we did and also the encouragement of being real in the workplace. I have a lot of stories about that too, but being transparent, because that's that's how we connect to one another,
Yeah.
is to be open, honest, and transparent. Otherwise, I don't really know who you are, right? Living a life of pretentious, being pretentious, and doing the little white lies and telling the little things that are not quite. I don't know. If you tell me that you're going to mail something to the franchisee tomorrow morning, then I expect you to do that. Be people of our word. Just small things that really make a difference, and the business people around you and your employees, let me tell you, they notice. And you do it. The Bible says, do your good works so that people may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So what are your good works? I mean, don't put them under a bushel, but you don't have to like flaunt them. It's just part of who you are.
It's beautiful. And can you tell us a story of a time when you saw God's hand at work in your company?
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you could tell many.
So I think one story that comes to my mind right now is being people of integrity. That's kind of a buzzword. It was really a big fat buzzword back in the day. Integrity. What does it mean? Like we broke it down. It simply means doing the right thing every time. Well, then people would say, yeah, but you can't do it every time. Well, okay, if you fail, then you admit it and you start again. So integrity is doing the right thing. And I remember a time we were, so we were departmentalizing, and we had a franchise department, we had a marketing department, we had a training department. So we had all of these departments, and the management team, all of the department heads would come together once a month, I believe it was, and they would talk about the issues and let each other know what's going on in their departments. And one of our policies was that you can only have one store. And then if you do one store well, you can do the second store. We'll let you have two stores. But we need to know what kind of a franchisee you will be for the company. It needs to be a good fit for you and for us. And so that was our policy. And at some point, the company had grown so much, and it was probably 1990, 94, maybe 95. I'm not sure what year, but about 7 years into the company. And I was traveling quite a bit, and I didn't always get all the information. And one meeting, I found out that there was a franchisee that signed up for a particular citywide territory agreement. Well, now I was beginning to understand franchising, and there was territory agreements are sold for big money. Like, wow, you can sell one franchisee a whole territory, and they can put, I don't know, 10 or 15 stores in that area. And that's not what we were about. So I came back from a meeting or from a trip, and I found out that we had signed somebody up to do a territory agreement. And I mean, I said, why? And I knew this man we were engaged in conversation, and I understood who he was and what he wanted to do, but I thought we were going to stick to it, right? So anyway, they had signed an agreement with this man in a city where a franchisee from Pennsylvania moved all the way to Illinois. And they had left everything here to do one store. And I had given them the promise, if you do one store really well, then we will give you the best store in the city if you do very well. And they had passed the test in flying colors. Like, they were going to get that one big store, a big mall in the area. And this franchisee that came in was from that area, and he was very wealthy, and he knew everything about the malls because he had other business in the malls in that city. And because of that, we felt like he could influence, or he could, grow Auntie Anne's faster because he could get into a number of malls without us even trying. And that's why they gave him that. So when I found it out, I said, guys, okay, I gave these people my word. I'm talking about integrity, doing what you say you're going to do. If you're not sure what you want to do, then don't say it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Think about what you're promising to people, right? And so I said, well, we promised this location to the existing franchisee. I'm going to have to go and talk to the new franchisee that made this agreement. And I'm going to try to talk him out of that one location. He can have the other 9, doesn't matter to me, but I want that one back. And my management team, they laughed at me. They're like, there's no way. This man will never give that location. Agreement is signed. It's a done deal. I said, that's fine. I'm going to have the meeting with it. So I got in the plane by myself, and I went and had this almost 3-hour long meeting with this particular, the new franchisee, the one that bought the whole territory, I was still hoping that I could go tell the old franchisees, the existing ones, that you'll get that mall because you're a great franchisee. And so after 3 hours, he stood up and he said to me, Aunt Ann, I hear what you're saying, but I want you to know I'm not giving up that location. I said, okay, listen, I understand it's not your problem, it's my problem. We made the mistake. But I just had to talk to you about this because I feel like the right thing for us to do was for me to just talk to you, and I'll go back to the existing franchisee and I'll live. So I went home that night and I was on my knees, I was praying, and I said, Lord, I'm really disappointed because I thought you promised me that this meeting was going to be successful between me and this franchisee. And the next morning I woke up and the phone rang. And the new franchisee called me, and I'm sorry, my VP of franchise called me and said, Aunt Ann, are you sitting down? I said, actually, I'm still in bed. And he said, I want you to know that the franchisee has drawn up a whole new agreement. And the one store that you want him to give up, he's going to give it up. He said, I have no idea why. And I asked him, why are you doing this? And the franchisee said, because I want to do the right thing. Mm. My point is, doing the right thing is hard to do, but I believe that God honors, as a Christian, pisses, and we carry God. We take him with us to the workplace. We know he's part of our business. He's the reason why we're in business. Number one, that's why we're in business, to honor and serve him. And I think that when we do the right thing, it may not please your team, but you know in your heart every single time you do the right thing, and there's great satisfaction in that.
Wow, what a powerful story. And how you, I mean, that's the L in the light, right? Lead by example. Exactly. Right. And that's the culture that you set there, that not only was embraced by the employees, but the franchisees, and even the hardest of people to get that through to this. And yet this man comes around because of the power of God in prayer.
Amen. And the thing that was so striking about that was, which I didn't even think about, I don't know, I was just doing what I felt like I had to do, right? But that message went across the franchise, the community of franchisees. And let me tell you, it spoke volumes to them. Like, Auntie Ann's is a company they're going to do the right thing. And it brought them comfort. It made them feel like they truly joined a really good company.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. There's so many other questions that I want to ask you, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I also would like for you to just share a bit about your books and how people can connect and hear more from you.
Well, I tried to put everything I know into the 3 or 4 books. I have a little storybook. It's called Auntie Ann, My Story. And then the very first book I wrote is called Twist of Faith, which is like a memoir, and it's timeless, and it has more details in it than most people may care about. And then we did the Secret Lies Within, which is a story. It talks about how I was able to overcome the trauma and the things that we talked about earlier. It's not a self-help book, but it does give people some insight about what it means to be traumatized, and what abuse is like, and how you can overcome all that. So that was Secret Lies Within. And then the Overcome and Lead was a book that I felt like I wanted to write to just help people understand what we did. What I'm talking to you about today is not complicated. It's really not. And I feel like there's plenty of the book of Proverbs. If you want to know how to start, build, and maintain a really healthy company, read the book of Proverbs every single day. That was my book. That was my go-to book, because the answers are in there. And there's plenty of other books that people write, which I've done myself, which is great. But the book of Proverbs is a great place to go to. But my book, Overcome and Lead, again, it's taken my story, a little bit about my story, personal story, and how we built the company, the principles that we've talked about here today in the Overcome and Lead book. And so that's a great book if you're stuck, you don't know what to do. Maybe you're just a startup, maybe you're at a point in your business where you don't know, do I sell? I don't know, just whatever. We find ourselves at different levels as we start and grow a company. And at times you feel stagnant or you really don't know what to do. Anyway, so I share my story in Overcome and Lead. And I believe that overcoming is really the kind of life that we are called to. I think that I know what it's like to live as a survivor. And being a survivor did not take me into the world of franchising, but it's the overcoming life that gives us the momentum that we need to be kingdom builders, I believe. And so the Overcome and Lead book talks about a lot of that. So, and then the Come to the Table. That's my that was a hard book, it's difficult to do the cookbook, but I just wanted to do that because of Come to the Table. I believe we need to rethink come to the table. Bring your family to the table. It's hard. I know we're all busy, but I don't know. At least let's try to come back to the table and have some really good, rich conversation. One of these days we're all going to come to the table. God has a table prepared for us. Wow, is that amazing or what? It's important. Come to the table.
Yes. And I'm sure you couldn't legally disclose the secret recipe behind the pretzels, but I'm sure there are some delicious recipes in that book.
That you were going to say that. And yes.
don't they all, right?
I don't even have a fake pretzel recipe in my cookbook. I just couldn't do it.
Well, AuntieAnnBeiler.com is the website, BEILER.com. Again, the books are Overcome and Lead, The Secret Lies Within, Come to the Table, the Come to the Table cookbook. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your wisdom. And just thank you for the example that you set for us marketplace Christians as we try to serve God more earnestly in the marketplace.
You're welcome. And thank you, Darren, for the privilege of sharing my story. And I pray that your listeners will have gotten one little nugget or something they can take with them to, become just great stewards of what God has entrusted them with. And if we can just look at it, that we're doing as unto the Lord, then your path becomes not easier, but more clear.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if so, we would greatly appreciate it if you'd leave us a quick rating and review for the Christianity and Business podcast on iTunes. You can get more information about HCU's Center for Christianity and Business and sign up to receive free access to all issues of the Christian Business Review Journal by visiting our website at christianityandbusiness.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep integrating biblical values into your business.